What's the first car that comes to mind when you think of pure American muscle? Of course, the Stang. But there is a dark secret in the Mustang family, a generation that almost killed the legend. But was it really that bad? We're about to find out as we rank every Mustang from hero to zero. Before we dive into this, I want you to know that this is my personal opinion. You might disagree, and that's totally cool. Feel free to express your disagreements in the comments below. All right, let's kick things off knowing how the legendary Ford Mustang came into existence. So back in the 1960s, Lee Iacocca had this crazy idea to create a car that was cool, affordable, and a blast to drive. Can you believe it? The motive was as simple as that. He dreamed up the Mustang and unveiled it at the New York World's Fair in 1964. And boom, the world went wild. Over 400,000 Mustangs sold in the first year. That's like selling a car every single minute. Now, let's get started. We have our S tier, which are the most prestigious ones. These are the legends that have left an indelible mark on the Mustang legacy. On the top of the list, we have the 1965 Ford Mustang GT350. This wasn't your average Mustang. This was the bad boy of the bunch. Built for speed and performance, it had a 289 cubic inch V8 engine that could make your heart race. And with its lightweight design, it was like a rocket on wheels. The GT350 didn't just win races, it became an instant icon, setting the bar high for every performance Mustang that followed. Now, let's fast forward to the present. Check out the 2020 Ford Mustang Shelby GT500. This is where things get interesting. They've stuffed a supercharged 5.2-liter V8 under the hood, pushing over 700 horsepower. It's a beast on the track for sure, but surprisingly, it's not a nightmare to drive every day. And come on, it looks incredible. Definitely a worthy successor to the original GT350. Last but not least in the S tier, we have the 1970 Ford Mustang Boss 429. This Mustang was purely designed to dominate the track. Ford had their sights set on NASCAR glory, and they weren't messing around. They stuffed a massive 429 cubic inch V8 into this thing, an engine so big, it practically filled the entire engine bay. This wasn't just about straight line speed, though the Boss 429 also had the handling to match. It's aggressive, it's powerful, and it's a true icon of the muscle car era. And there you have it, the S tier. But let's not stop here. Moving on to our A tier. In our A tier, we have some classic Mustangs that are beloved by petrol heads around the world. Let's start off with the 1969 Ford Mustang Mach-E. This one's all about looking cool. I mean, those front spoilers and rear window louvres? So stylish. But it wasn't just about the looks though. They backed it up with some serious power, offering different engine options, including the awesome 351 cubic inch V8. So, you got the style and the speed. A total classic. Next up in the A tier, we have the 1987 to 1993 Ford Mustang GT. Now, let's jump back in time. In the late 80s, muscle cars were kind of fading out, but then, bam! Ford drops this lightweight, mean machine that just screams performance. What made it so special? Well, for starters, it was light. Like, seriously nimble. And under the hood, you had some awesome engine options, including a feisty turbocharged 4-cylinder for those who wanted something a little different. But let's be real, the star of the show was that good 5-liter V8. It was like Ford's way of saying, hey, muscle cars aren't dead. So last off in the A tier list, we get to the 2015 Mustang. And things got seriously modern. They gave it a major makeover, with independent rear suspension a huge upgrade, and a much more refined look. But don't worry, they didn't lose that classic Mustang vibe. And get this, for the first time ever, you could get it with a turbocharged 4-cylinder. Now that's what I call a change. These classics hold their ground with style and performance. Now let's shift gears into our B tier. In our B tier are the Mustangs that are pretty darn good, even if they're not the absolute legends. They've got something special going on for them. Starting off the B tier, we have the 1971 Mustang. This was the biggest of the first-gen Mustangs, with a longer hood and a more pronounced fastback roofline on some models. It had a more aggressive, almost predatory stance. The design reflected the trend toward larger, more luxurious muscle cars of the era. It lost some of the original's compact, sporty feel, but it had a commanding presence. The engine it had was a 429 Cobra Jet V8 producing around 370 horsepower. Next up in the B tier, we have the 2005 Mustang. This generation nailed the retro look. It took clear inspiration from the classic Mustangs of the late 60s, with a long hood, short deck, and sharp lines. The design was a huge hit, capturing the essence of the original while adding modern touches. It was a bold statement that Ford was serious about reviving the Mustang's heritage. The engine it had was a 4.6-liter 3-valve SOHC V8, producing around 300 horsepower. Lastly, in the B tier, we have the 2024 Ford Mustang Dark Horse. This is the most aggressive-looking modern Mustang. It features unique dark trim, a distinctive front grille, and performance-oriented aerodynamic elements like a rear spoiler and front splitter. The design screams performance and sets it apart from the standard Mustang. It's a modern interpretation of the classic muscle car aesthetic. The engine was a specially modified 5-liter Coyote V8 targeting around 500 horsepower. These Mustangs may not be at the top of everyone's list, but they certainly have their own unique appeal. Here's a twist that I bet you didn't know. The iconic rear-wheel drive muscle car almost wasn't a rear-wheel drive. Not once, but almost twice the Stang was supposed to be a front-wheel drive. In the early 1960s, before the Mustang even galloped onto the scene, some prototypes were built with power being sent to the front wheels, a truly free-thinking notion for a car that would become a symbol of rear-wheel drive freedom. But the story doesn't end there. In the late 80s, facing looming specter of fuel economy standards, Ford once again considered this unthinkable shift, even going so far as developing a front-wheel drive prototype slated to share a platform with Mazda. Imagine a Mustang that pulled rather than pushed, a betrayal of everything it stood for. While passionate outcry from enthusiasts thankfully averted this disaster both times, the fact that this front-wheel drive treachery was even considered not once but twice leaves a disturbing question mark hanging over the Mustang's legacy. How close did we truly come to losing the very essence of this American icon? Now let's take a look at our C tier, the average descent and which has nothing to brag about. Here things start getting a bit more mixed. First off, we have the 1974 to 1978 Ford Mustang II. This Mustang was significantly smaller and more angular than its predecessors. It was designed for fuel efficiency, not style, and it showed. The design was practical but lacked the visual excitement of earlier Mustangs. It was a product of its time, reflecting the trends of smaller, more economical cars. Secondly, we have the 1994 to 2004 Ford Mustang. This generation was a major redesign, but it was often criticized for its soft, rounded lines and generic styling. It lacked the distinctive character of other Mustangs. It was a safe design, but it didn't take any risks. And it didn't really stand out. It was a transitional design, paving the way for the retro-inspired Mustangs of the mid-2000s. Lastly, we have the 2011 Ford Mustang V6. The 2011 Mustang brought a sharper, more modern design with more aggressive lines and a more muscular stance. It was a significant improvement over the previous generation. However, the V6 models lacked some of the visual cues that distinguish the V8 GT, like the larger grille and rear spoiler. It had a decent 3.7-liter Duratec V6 engine, which produced around 305 horsepower. These models have their merits, but leave some enthusiasts wanting more. Now let's move on to our D tier, the interesting ones, but didn't quite hit the mark, where we can find some of the less favored Mustangs, or should I say, worst Mustangs. Let's start the D tier list with the 1984 Ford Mustang SVO. This Mustang has a unique look, with a distinctive front fascia featuring a biplane spoiler and offset hood scoop. It looked more like a European sports car than a traditional Mustang. The design was functional and aimed at improving aerodynamics and cooling, but it didn't resonate with traditional Mustang fans. This bad boy bagged a 2.3-liter turbocharged incline-4 engine, which produced around 175 horsepower. Moving on with the list, we have the 2019 Ford Mustang Bullitt. This special edition focused on subtle styling cues that paid homage to the movie car. It featured dark green paint, minimal badging, and a cue ball shift knob. The design was understated and classy, but it wasn't dramatically different from a standard Mustang GT. The engine was a killer 5-liter Coyote V8 producing around 480 horsepower. Last on the list is the 2021 Ford Mustang Mach-E. This is a completely different animal. It's a 4-door electric SUV with a sleek, modern design. While it borrows some styling cues from the Mustang, like the tri-bar taillights, it's a very different shape and form. It's a well-designed EV, but it doesn't look like a traditional Mustang at all. It's a crossover, not a pony car. It's a bold and futuristic design that pushes the boundaries of electric vehicle aesthetics. This electric powertrain has up to 480 horsepower in the GT Performance Edition. And that wraps up our Mustang tier list. We hope you had as much fun as we did ranking these iconic cars. We've laid down our rankings, but the real debate starts now. Let us know in the comments which Mustang you think deserves the crown. We also dove deeper into the top 12 modern muscle cars in our last video, so if you're craving more automotive knowledge, definitely check that out. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed our rankings and subscribe for more automotive content. Until next time.